It all started when my sister Emily and I were taken. The bad guys who grabbed us wanted our parents to choose. They could only save one of us. My parents picked Emily, so the kidnappers killed me. It happened so fast and it was brutal, but then something unbelievable happened. I woke up. I was alive, but not in my own body. I was in someone else's. This new girl, her name was Lisa. She had a tough life. Her grandma couldn't move, and her mom had a bad leg. They didn't have much money, but they loved each other a lot. It was the kind of love I'd always wanted. One day I was walking, and this woman stopped me. She looked frantic, like she was about to fall apart. She asked if I'd seen her daughter. I knew who she was. She was my mom from my old life. But she looked so much older, so worn down. I just shook my head and said, no. Her daughter, my sister, had been gone for 5 years. It was her own fault, really. It was her choice. It all came back to me that horrible day. Emily and I were tied up in this rundown warehouse. There was a camera pointed at us, and the kidnappers were behind us, eating and laughing like it was a party. One of them, a big, mean-looking guy, yelled at the camera. He said, "George, which one of your precious daughters are you going to let die?" Emily was shaking so hard, I just stared at the screen where I could see my parents. They looked ancient, like they'd aged 10 years in a day. They were begging, pleading with the kidnappers to let us go. They'd give them anything, any amount of money. Then there was a crash. A bottle shattered behind us. I tried to shield Emily and glass flew everywhere, cutting my face. The kidnapper, the leader, was furious. "George, you're begging now? Where were you when my company went under? I needed your help, but you didn't care." He was screaming. "I want one of your daughters to pay. Choose, the older one or the younger one, or they both die." A countdown started, ticking away like a death clock. Every tick made my heart pound harder. Emily was shivering, her eyes wide with terror. Tears streamed down her face, falling onto my shoulder. They felt like they were burning me. The countdown had barely begun when I heard my mom's voice, desperate and panicked. "Save the younger one. Please, I'm begging you." They chose Emily. They abandoned me. I knew it was going to happen, but hearing my own parents choose my sister over me, it broke something inside. It felt like all the strength just drained out of me. I slumped to the ground, everything going blurry. The kidnapper pulled Emily away. Then he came back for me, yanking the cloth out of my mouth. "Kid, you got 1 minute. Last words." That ticking clock again. 1 minute. That's all I had left. My body started shaking uncontrollably. I wanted to say something, anything, but I couldn't. 20 seconds, the kidnapper said, his voice so close, yet so far away. Suddenly, I could hear again. All the sounds, the crying, the shouting, crashed in on me. I looked at the screen, trying so hard to speak, to say something to my parents. But nothing came out. Just tears. Silent tears. And then a cold blade sliced across my throat. I watched my own blood spill out. Lying there, I felt my life fading away, like a candle flickering in the wind. It felt like a long, slow dream. Memories flashed through my mind. I remembered being little, up until I was about 10. I thought I had two moms. One who was always there and one who only existed on the phone. The one who was always there was actually my Aunt Jessica. The one on the phone was my real mom. When I was 3, things got tough for my family. They were drowning in debt. They were always working, always stressed. They couldn't take care of me, so they sent me to live with Aunt Jessica. They didn't want me to suffer with them. Aunt Jessica was young, single, and an artist. She'd sit by the window for hours, painting with a big mug of coffee. I was a light sleeper, always waking up from nightmares. She'd hold me, tell me stories, and sing me back to sleep. She smelled like flowers and vanilla. Her voice was so soothing. I always felt safe with her. She was different from the mom on the phone. Aunt Jessica laughed a lot. She wore pretty dresses and put makeup on. She loved dressing me up in cute outfits and braiding my hair. Then we'd go out for cake. She always said, "Girls should always feel beautiful, no matter how young." One night, I got really sick. I had a high fever and I was aching all over. I kept calling for my mom, delirious with fever. I felt a soft, warm hug. Someone was patting my back gently, humming a lullaby. When I woke up, Aunt Jessica was there, her eyes tired and rimmed with dark circles. I called her mom. She paused, then gently reminded me that she was my aunt. The woman who called every week was my real mom. I didn't get it. I'd seen other kids' moms. They were just like Aunt Jessica. They tucked their kids in, took them out, dressed them up. But the mom who called, she never came to see me. She never played with me. Sometimes she even forgot to call. I asked Aunt Jessica if she could be my mom instead, and if the lady on the phone could be my aunt. She was quiet for a long time. Then she patted my head and said that the woman on the phone would always be my mom. She said my mom loved me, but she was just really, really busy. I didn't understand those grown-up reasons. I thought Aunt Jessica didn't want to be my mom. I cried and cried until she finally gave in. She said when nobody was around, it was okay to call her mom. I was so happy. Aunt Jessica was just like the other moms at my preschool. She always smiled and waited for me, no matter the weather or how busy she was. Then we'd walk home together, hand in hand. Other kids would say my mom was pretty, and I'd feel so proud. I lived with Aunt Jessica like that until I was 7. Then, one day, she told me my mom had a new baby, a little sister for me, and soon they'd be taking me back home. She was washing vegetables, her back to me. Her voice was light and cheerful, like she was happy for me. She said my parents' business was doing better, and things were good at home now. They could give me a better life. It took me a moment to figure out who she meant by mom. My real mom hadn't called in over 6 months. That was the first time I realized I wouldn't always be here. I was supposed to leave. That night, I barely ate. I quietly asked Aunt Jessica, "Can I eat less so you won't send me back?" Being with her was perfect. I wasn't greedy. Aunt Jessica was stunned for a while. She didn't say anything, just hugged me tight, her eyes filling with tears. For the next few days, I was constantly worried about being sent away. I couldn't eat or sleep properly. Then, one day, I overheard Aunt Jessica on the phone. Someone was saying my sister was too little and they didn't have the energy to take care of me yet. They hoped Aunt Jessica could keep looking after me for a few more years. Knowing I wouldn't be sent away made me so happy. Aunt Jessica didn't say it, but I could tell she was happy too. She even made 2 extra dishes for dinner that night. Still, I kept forgetting that I wasn't Aunt Jessica's child. One day, I would have to go back to my parents. Life at Aunt Jessica's was peaceful and simple, like the water she washed vegetables with every day. So the day to return came faster than I expected. When I was 10, I came home from school one day and shouted, "Mom, I'm back." 2 voices answered. That's when I realized my mom from the phone was there too. The air got awkward. Mom didn't look too pleased, and Aunt Jessica was the one who broke the tension. "I thought she was calling me Auntie," she said, trying to laugh it off. After dinner, Mom was ready to take me away. I didn't want to go. I clung to Aunt Jessica, asking if she didn't want me anymore. Aunt Jessica looked at me, her eyes red. Her expression was a mix of sadness, reluctance, and nervousness. She forced a smile and gently pushed me toward my mom. "Don't take it to heart," she said to my mom. "Sarah just needs to adjust. Spend more time with her and she'll warm up. Sarah really likes the gifts you send, and she often dreams about you. It's getting late. You should head back early. Drive safely," she added, as if ignoring my pleading eyes, insisting on giving me to my mom. When we left, I didn't take anything with me. Mom said everything new was ready at home. Aunt Jessica stood by the door until I couldn't see her in the rearview mirror anymore. Even if they didn't say it, I knew it would be a long time before I saw Aunt Jessica again. I cried quietly. Mom held me close and tried to cheer me up, telling me all about my new room, the princess room, the pretty dresses, and all the yummy snacks. I just kept my head down, silent. She eventually stopped talking and just sighed. Honestly, I didn't hate her. I knew she was busy. But she still found time to call me, to send gifts. Aunt Jessica reminded me many times that it wasn't because my parents didn't love me. They didn't want me to suffer with them. Now that things were better, they wanted me back. I remember all of this, but I still wished Aunt Jessica could be my mom. She was the one who raised me. We got by just fine like that for so long. Why did everything have to change so suddenly? After a long car ride, Mom showed me a beautiful house. It had a garden, a swing set, and lights everywhere. It was way bigger and brighter than Aunt Jessica's place. She said this was going to be my new home. Everything felt strange and awkward. I followed her quietly inside. Then a little girl came running out, jumping into her arms, calling her mom in a sweet voice. I watched as my mom's sharp features softened. She knelt down, asking about what the girl had eaten that day, listening to her ramble on. I remembered how Aunt Jessica used to hold my hand when I was in preschool, listening to my endless chatter with a smile. Watching Mom and my sister together, I didn't feel jealous or envious, but it still ached inside. Maybe it was because they looked like a real mother and daughter, and I felt like an outsider. And now, this outsider had to join them, share the same mom. My nose stung with tears I couldn't let fall. I just clenched my clothes tightly. I stood there for what felt like ages until my sister pointed at me asking, "Who's she?" Mom pulled my sister over to me. "Emily, say hi to your sister." Sister's name was Emily. She was chubby and cute, super friendly. She studied me briefly before grabbing my hand. "Sister, I'll show you where the yummy stuff is." Her steps were a little wobbly. Mom protected her every move, her eyes full of love. I suddenly wondered if she ever looked at me that way before. I couldn't find the answer. All I remembered was Aunt Jessica's eyes looking at me like that. That first night in my new home, I went to bed early. Wrapped in the soft covers, I finally felt a bit at ease. Later, Mom came in and said she was worried I couldn't sleep in a new bed. She offered to stay with me, but as soon as she sat down, my sister knocked on the door, crying for a bedtime story. Mom looked torn, her eyes full of guilt and conflict. I told her to go to my sister. She visibly relaxed and praised me for being so mature. I watched her smile and lowered my eyes silently. "Mom, I wasn't being mature. I just don't need anyone to stay with me anymore. I used to cry for bedtime stories too, but you weren't there then. Now I don't need them anymore." After Mom left, I picked up my phone to call Aunt Jessica. It just kept ringing busy. I guess she was busy. I could call her later. As I waited, I listened to the playful sounds of Mom and sister next door and drifted off. A week later, Dad came back from a business trip. He brought each of us a dress. My sister's fit perfectly, but mine was too small and not my color. Dad looked a bit awkward, apologizing and saying he'd prepare it again for me. I just shook my head. Honestly, it's easy to understand. My little sister has been growing up under his watchful eyes since she was born. He knows every stage of her development and what she likes. But for me, he just gets a quick glimpse in video calls. How much can he know from that? To celebrate our family of 4 being together, Dad rented out an entire restaurant. The place was like a fairy tale world. It was my first time seeing it like that. My sister, though, was used to it. Before the meal, Mom carefully reminded my sister about her dietary restrictions. But she ordered me shrimp without knowing I'm allergic to seafood. Even though Aunt Jessica had reminded her several times when she picked me up, and even made a note for her, she forgot. I wasn't really sad. I know how busy she is and how hard it is to remember every little thing. I just missed my Aunt Jessica. Aunt Jessica never forgets what I like. Every time we eat out, she thoughtfully reminds me about my dietary restrictions. She was always patient, meticulous, and gentle, just like Mom is with my sister. Since I came back, I haven't seen Aunt Jessica. Dad said she's traveling and doesn't know when she'll be back. He also told me not to bother her too much and to reach out to him and Mom if I need anything. I agreed silently, but I couldn't help calling Aunt Jessica over and over. At first, it was a busy signal, then it just turned into a disconnected number. I knew it was Mom and Dad not wanting her to see me. They were worried I'd get too close to Aunt Jessica and drift away from them. The day I called Aunt Jessica Mom seemed to be a thorn in their side. But they forgot, originally. It was them who said they didn't have the energy to take care of me and sent me to Aunt Jessica's place. They were so busy with work that they never visited me, and eventually, even their calls became perfunctory. Children are the easiest to please, but also the best at distinguishing closeness. Mom and Dad, you were the ones who pushed me away first. I know they've been trying to mend our relationship. They treat me well, providing excellent material conditions. I transferred to a better private school, have a driver take me to and from school, and every season, someone delivers my clothes home. The nanny prepares nutritious meals in various styles, but we still can't get close. Unlike my sister, who freely snuggles up to them, begging for braids or pulling dad's beard, turning everything into a playful mess, I always sit quietly on the sofa. She's full of life, always making them laugh heartily. When she's upset, she throws tantrums and scatters her toys, waiting for us to comfort her. Her emotions are always so vivid. But I'm usually quiet without much to say. Most of the time, they just care about my grades, if my allowance is enough, or if I need anything, speaking and acting like they're talking to a guest. It doesn't really bother me. Any relationship needs time. We just haven't spent enough time together to build anything. But I still feel a bit sad inside. I guess it's how people naturally long for family ties. It's a good thing my sister is so cheerful. We're really close. She's always chattering around me, calling me Big Sis. Every time the driver picks me up, she likes to tag along. Sometimes I sneak her out for street food. At each stall, she shouts, "Don't add seafood, okay? My sister is allergic." She might forget lots of things, but she remembers I can't have it. Thanks to her, our family seems pretty harmonious. She's like a button, stitching me and our parents into a semblance of togetherness, hiding the rough patches with her spirited antics. So, at 14, when my sister was kidnapped, my relationship with my parents hit rock bottom. That New Year's Eve, they promised to take us to the river to set off fireworks. She was excited all day, but then a call came, something urgent at work, and they might not make it back. She started crying and throwing a fit, even refused to eat. I thought since it wasn't far, just 10 minutes away in the villa area, we could get the butler to drive us. I was young and thought it wouldn't hurt, never considering the danger of traffickers. While the butler took a call, my sister and I were knocked out and taken away. When I came to, we were locked in a truck's cargo hold with other kids. My little sister was terrified, clinging to me in fear. I was scared too, but I couldn't show it. I checked my pockets. Phones and valuables were gone. I comforted her while planning our escape. The truck was parked in a secluded underpass still within city limits. It was now or never before they drove off. We couldn't escape together, too risky with her so small and vulnerable. I couldn't leave her behind, though. The best plan was to get someone who could escape and call the police. I spotted a boy about my age among the kids. He looked smart, even with a bruised face. I slid over, asking if he was brave enough to try escaping. I told him my plan. Removing my jacket, I banged on the door, claiming I had a stomachache. When the guard opened it, I threw my jacket over his head and caused a commotion. Kids jumped out, running in all directions. But it didn't last long. They got me down quickly, and more of the gang showed up. The kids were caught and brought back. They did a head count and realized someone was missing. Unsurprisingly, they beat me up. My sister tried to protect me, but I held on to her. I didn't want her to get hurt. I'm not sure how long it went on, but my whole body was in pain. She stayed in my arms, sobbing, and I croaked reassurances of safety. I knew I'd alerted someone. Help would come soon. But truthfully, I'd seen the boy hadn't made it far in the dark. The area was too open. Getting caught was inevitable. So I just caused some chaos, hoping all the traffickers would chase after people. This way, he could steal a phone and call for help. That little boy is hiding under a car now. The traffickers searched everywhere and couldn't find him. They thought he really ran off. Then they beat me up again and decided to leave without waiting for their accomplices. I listened with all my might, but gradually lost consciousness. When I woke up, I was in the hospital with tubes all over me. I couldn't speak, but I heard my mom crying her heart out. Later, I learned that I had been beaten unconscious. The traffickers thought I was dead and dumped me from the car, but my sister was still with them. After they drove off, the little boy carried me out and ran into the police. We got rushed to the hospital. I was in intensive care for a long time, and then I moved to a regular room. My parents only came twice. They were visibly thinner, desperate to find my sister, yet by the time I healed, she hadn't been found. Even though the report included the license plate, those traffickers were sneaky. They switched cars a few times, making it hard to track them. No one knew where my sister ended up. After she was kidnapped, my parents seemed to lose their spirit. They looked defeated. Even their hair at the temples had turned gray. Dad buried himself in work, often on business trips for months. Mom started drinking a lot. I knew that under the calm surface were turbulent emotions. One day, Mom got drunk. The alcohol numbed her briefly, but it also tore her open, revealing sharp and ugly truths. That night, she smashed a lot of things and cried, blaming it all on me. She said if it weren't for me insisting on taking my sister to watch fireworks, she wouldn't have been kidnapped. She screamed, asking why it wasn't me who got taken. She accused me of being jealous of my sister, suggesting I let it happen on purpose. Otherwise, why was I the one who escaped? I didn't know how to answer, so I just endured it silently. The next day, Mom sobbed an apology, saying it was just drunken nonsense and not to take it to heart. But how could I forget? The resentment and hatred in your eyes were so real. Mom, how do I tell you I'd rather it was me who got taken? In this family, there's always been an invisible barrier between us, except with my sister. She would always save a good share of food and fun for me. She never forgot my seafood allergy, whereas you two often did. You were always busy. On nights when she had nightmares or couldn't sleep, she'd crawl into my bed. She loved hugging me, saying I was the best sister in the world, and yet I couldn't protect her. Wouldn't it have been better if it was me who got kidnapped? Then maybe you wouldn't be in so much pain. The search never stopped, but there's no news. Occasionally, a lead would pop up and my parents would rush over, only to come back empty-handed. I'd often find them crying in her room, gently caressing her picture. I didn't know how to comfort them. I didn't have her liveliness, her quirky spirit. I couldn't make anyone happy, not even myself. I just kept studying hard, staying at the top of my class. I entered a lot of competitions and won many certificates and awards, even though my parents didn't care. I didn't know why I did it, but sparing them from any worry or disappointment seemed like the only thing I could do. I knew I couldn't take my sister's place in their hearts, but I hoped they'd be happy for even a moment because of me. In high school, a boy transferred into my class. I recognized him as the kid who escaped that night. He said his name was David. Without the bruises, David had a really handsome face, making him popular at school. But he kept to himself, always following me around. I knew he recognized me too. Before long, he moved into the villa area where I lived and became my neighbor. We became friends. On New Year's Eve at 15, my parents got a new lead and flew to another city. I was left home alone. Coincidentally, David was alone too. He invited me over to his place for the night. He made a whole table of dishes and even opened a bottle of wine. That evening was the first time David talked about his family. His dad had an affair, his mom passed away, and the other woman not only entered his home, but also plotted for him to be kidnapped. He said if I hadn't helped him escape that night, his family wouldn't have been searching for him like mine was for my sister. That's when I realized life hands out different struggles to everyone. David was composed when he spoke. His brow didn't even twitch. I wondered how many turbulent nights he'd weathered to be this calm. If my sister were here, she'd find ways to lighten the mood. But I was always bad with words, so I simply clinked glasses with him. That New Year's Eve, David and I sat side by side on the couch, watching a dull New Year's gala on TV. As the clock struck midnight, David asked if I had any New Year wishes. I quietly said, I hope my sister is found soon. He didn't say anything at first, but sighed softly after a long pause. She will be, he said. Sarah, your sister's situation isn't your fault. You've done your best. I didn't respond. My eyes just welled up with tears, and that was the first time someone told me I did my best. At 3, my parents sent me to live with my aunt. I held back from asking for Mom, except in dreams or when I was sick. Even then, I did my best. At 10, they brought me back and forbade me from seeing my aunt. I tried to adapt to a new home and family, attempting to avoid being a burden. I did my best then, too. At 14, I didn't want to let my sister down and took her to watch fireworks. We got kidnapped, and I did everything I could to escape and protect her whenever they hit me. Once again, I did my best. After my sister disappeared, I bore the silent resentment and disappointment of my parents while studying hard to spare everyone more worry. I gave it my all. With every moment, I gave my best, yet it felt like there was never a happy ending. After 3 years of searching, the trafficking ring was dismantled and my sister was finally found. She had gone through something, but I didn't know what. She got so thin that she was just skin and bones. She forgot everything from before, didn't remember us, and became a bit out of it with one ear that couldn't hear. Mom and Dad took her for a full checkup. The doctor said her condition was caused by some kind of shock, but with good care, she could recover. Her ear couldn't be fixed, though. She'd need a hearing aid for life. But at least she came back alive. Mom and Dad's worries eased up a bit, and they got busy helping her get better. At first, during the first month, she would scream in the middle of the night, crouching in the closet, crying and shouting, "Emily is in pain! Save me!" When Mom and Dad were busy, I was the one she relied on most. But I was also the reason she was taken and turned into this. In that moment, I couldn't bring myself to go near her. I could only stand to the side. Mom sat on the floor, crying with her, giving me a watery look full of disappointment. It was like her eyes were asking, "She trusted you so much. Why didn't you protect her?" I just sat there, hating my own helplessness for letting my sister become like this. I didn't know how long I sat there until a beam from the window caught my eye. It was David, using a flashlight to get my attention, to check my phone. It was our special way to say hi. I looked at my phone. Sure enough, there was a message. "Get some sleep. Let's have croissant sandwiches for breakfast." We were two people, disconnected from our families, comforting each other in our own way. After she was found, my sister was really unstable. Sometimes she'd remember Mom. Other times she was cautious with everyone. She often ran out instinctively, saying she wanted to go home. We hired lots of caregivers to watch her round the clock, and Mom left her work just to be with her. The doctor recommended doing things she used to do to help her recover. It was like helping her grow up all over again. Mom would make desserts with her in the kitchen, read her bedtime stories every night. They'd share secrets and laughs while I stood watching from behind. I could see Mom was tired, but her eyes were always bright. That light was something she had just for my sister. After 3 dull years, it lit up again. I should have been happy, but inside there was still a tinge of bitterness. One day, my sister woke up from a nightmare. She ran to my room, climbed into my bed, and hugged me, saying, "Sister, Emily is scared." I didn't miss the fleeting stiffness on Mom's face. That night, my sister slept with me, and Mom sat in the living room all night. I didn't know if Mom couldn't sleep or just didn't want to. I suddenly remembered that time she got drunk. She had accused me of being jealous of my sister, insinuating I let her get taken on purpose. Was she afraid I'd let my sister run off again? I wanted to reassure her that I wouldn't let that happen, but I couldn't shake off that sadness deep inside. After that, I tried to come home late every night. By the time I got back, my sister was already asleep. David probably knew about my family situation, but he never asked. He'd just join me in running laps around the track when I didn't want to go home. Then he'd tell me what we were going to eat for breakfast the next day. Without David, I don't know if I would have gotten through that time. At the end of junior year, Mom told me my sister's condition was unstable, and since I had college entrance exams coming up, they decided to take her away for quiet recovery. I knew it wasn't really about disturbing me. My presence was a distraction for her. Whenever I was around, even if she didn't remember, she'd want to be close to me. But Mom and Dad didn't want her getting too attached to me. I didn't argue, just silently agreed. I've never been the one to be chosen. I knew it, and I could accept it. But then, one day, my Aunt Jessica suddenly showed up. After 8 years, I saw her again. She was still just as beautiful and graceful as I remembered. Looking at me, tears welled up in her eyes. She said I'd grown taller, even prettier. She brought lots of gifts for me and my sister from her world travels. While we opened them, she went with my parents to the study. I heard them arguing. "This is how you parent? Emily's pitiful, but isn't Sarah your daughter too? Leaving Sarah here alone, doesn't that bother you? But Sarah is your daughter. How could she ever hurt Emily? Don't stop me from doing it." Suddenly, a cool hand touched my face. "Sister, why are you crying? Is something hurting you? Emily will blow on it. It won't hurt anymore." I touched my face. It was wet with tears. I didn't even mean to cry. What's there to cry about? I've grown up. I can take care of myself. I know how to eat when hungry and dress warmly when cold. Even if mom and dad moved away, I wouldn't do too badly. I had forgotten, though, that people have hearts, and seeing yourself always left behind, it hurts. That day, Aunt Jessica stayed, arguing with mom and dad for a long time. She left with red eyes. But mom and dad left with my sister the next day anyway. It wasn't surprising. For half a year after they left, they never came back. Sometimes I'd see mom's posts on social media with pictures of them taking my sister swimming, to amusement parks, doing parent child activities. Those were moments I'd never been a part of. They'd wear matching clothes, smiling happily at the camera. My sister seemed so much better. I'd look at those photos, crying quietly under my covers. I knew my sister had been through a lot and I shouldn't compare. But I couldn't help feeling jealous. I never had such times with mom and dad. Even after they brought me back, they rarely attended any parent nights. They were always too busy to be part of my growth, yet they had endless patience for my sister. They say comparison is the thief of joy. But how do I stop myself from comparing? I can't help but wonder, if it had been me who was kidnapped, would my parents have searched for me so desperately and tirelessly? Would they have gone through raising me all over again? Yes, they would, but would they really? In my senior year of high school, I studied like crazy and got the high grades I wanted. When it came time to choose a college, I deliberately picked one far away, and I almost never went home during holidays or weekends. I'd say the trip was too long and exhausting, and my parents wouldn't say much about it, but David would always stay with me. To my parents, whether I was home or not didn't matter much. I had come to terms with it. You can't force relationships. I was born into their family, but we never felt that close. So we'd each go our way and wish each other well from afar. I calmly accepted it and calmly distanced myself. But fate loves to toy with people. During my winter break in my freshman year of college, my sister and I were kidnapped. Again, the kidnapper was a business rival of my parents. He didn't want money or anything, but forced my parents to choose between my sister and me. My sister was terrified and cried a lot, but I was calm. The moment the kidnapper laid out his demands, I knew I'd be the one they'd choose to leave. There was no need for them to make a choice. I'd protect my sister at all costs. I had sworn that she'd never get hurt again. As I watched my parents pleading desperately on the screen, somewhere deep inside, I felt a hint of happiness. Because at least for a moment, I could pretend their grief was partly for me. The kidnapper gave them 3 minutes to decide. But before time was even up, Mom chose my sister. She was too scared my sister would get hurt again. I thought I could remain calm until the end. But when the choice came out of my parents' mouths, I couldn't help feeling devastated. It was a sadness that ran deep to my core. So it really is this hard to accept being insignificant. To my parents, I could be discarded without much thought. So why did you decide to have me in the first place? Am I not your child? Could you not choose me just for 1 second? The moment my throat was slit, I heard my mom's heart-wrenching scream. My eyes were brimming with tears, filled with despair, yet strangely calm. Mom, don't be sad. I protected my sister. Would that make you happy for just a moment? Would you grieve for me? But being your daughter is just too exhausting. You brought me into this world, and now you've let go of my life. I guess it's a full circle. Let's not meet again in the next life. Lying there on the ground, warm blood spreading across my face, I felt so tired, so exhausted. Let's sleep. Once I'm asleep, it won't hurt anymore. There'll be no more sadness. Just before my eyes closed, I saw my sister struggling desperately, even though she was tied up. She was still trying to crawl towards me. I wanted to speak, but only blood flowed from my mouth. I couldn't make a sound, just opened and closed my lips. Emily, grow up well. Your sister can't be there for you anymore, so you must grow up well. Then darkness covered my eyes, and I finally fell asleep. Where do you go when you die? I wandered aimlessly through nothingness, surrounded by darkness, with only a faint light in the distance. I moved towards it instinctively, trying to grasp it, but I could never reach it. I kept running and fell into a big pit. I jolted awake, but my vision was blurry. In my haze, I saw a figure sitting by my bed. She wiped my sweat and gave me medicine. I tried to speak, but my voice was hoarse. Mom, do you really not want me? The figure scolded gently. Stop talking nonsense. She got ready to leave. I instinctively grabbed her, wanting to say something, but I couldn't make a sound. Tears just wouldn't stop. She sat next to me again, gently wiping my tears away. Why the tears? Come on, take your medicine and you'll feel better. I swallowed the pill with difficulty, urgently grabbing onto her clothing. Mom, don't go. With a sigh, I fell into a warm embrace, smelling faintly of laundry detergent. She softly patted my back, lulling me to sleep in the gentlest tone. I clung on like a drowning person holding onto driftwood. Mom, why didn't you ever hold me like this before? I drifted back into sleep. This time I saw a girl, her face stained with tears, waving goodbye. Please, look after Mom and Grandma for me. I have to go now. I wanted to speak, to reach out to her, but I couldn't move or make a sound. The moment she disappeared, a flood of memories rushed into my mind. I suddenly realized I had died, but was reborn. Mom! My chest was heaving with heavy breaths, the feeling of a blade slashing my throat still lingering on my skin. I gasped, putting a hand to my neck. No scar. Again, I remembered I wasn't Sarah anymore. It's my 7th day of being reborn, and I still can't get used to this new identity. Every night, I relive that kidnapping night. I thought I was dead when they killed me, but my soul ended up in the body of a girl named Ashley who had drowned saving someone. That night, the waving hand I saw was her fading spirit. By some twist of fate, I entered her body, getting another chance at life. But Ashley and I are 5 years apart. Those memories of being kidnapped, ripped away, it felt like they just happened. Though now, it's been 5 years since I died. I sat there for a while, calming myself before I got up to wash. I'd been running a high fever after almost drowning, and I took a week off from school. Today was the day to go back. Getting myself ready, I called out as I was leaving, Grandma, I'm off to school. Ashley, wait a minute. Grandma called me into the room. Well, room is a stretch since it's just separated from the living room by a curtain. The only room with a door is the one I stay in, while Mom and Grandma sleep behind the curtain. Our family's just the 3 of us. My mom, who's lame, my grandma, who's been paralyzed for years, and me, a high school senior. We make ends meet with a dumpling stand. We're not well off, not even close. When I pulled back the curtain, Grandma was sitting at the head of the bed with a small table in front of her, rolling dough. Mom had already gone to the market to buy groceries. As I got closer, Grandma wiped her hands and slipped 2 eggs and $20 into my hands. She then tidied up my school uniform. You just got over being sick, so stay warm, don't catch a cold again. Senior year is tough, make sure you're eating enough. Get some meat at lunch. The autumn morning wind was chilly, but with those warm eggs in my pocket, I felt cozy all over walking down the street. Ashley's family might not be rich, but her mom and grandma never skimp on her. They always make sure she has what she needs, especially now in senior year, giving her pocket money to get herself a treat. Ashley is thoughtful. She knows every penny is hard-earned, so she doesn't waste money. Sometimes she even uses her saved-up cash to buy things for her mom and grandma. They understand and support each other like that, living simply but warmly. It's the kind of plain happiness I've always wanted, but never quite reached. In the classroom, I flipped through Ashley's textbooks. Thankfully, in the past 5 years, while some materials changed, the main stuff stayed pretty much the same. I've only been out of school for half a year, so I still remember most of the important stuff. If I start working hard again, getting into a top college shouldn't be too hard. After school, I swung by the bookstore at the back entrance and picked up a few study guides. Then, I headed over to the night market across the street. Ashley's mom, Susan, sells dumplings there. After school, Ashley usually helps out before they head home together. When I arrived, Susan was at the dumpling stand wrapping them up. The pot nearby was bubbling with boiling water, and the mist softened her features. It made me think of the figure that was sitting by my bed when I was barely awake these last few days, equally gentle and slender. I quietly called her, "Mom, I'm back from school." Susan's eyes lit up for a moment when she looked up. She set aside her work and dropped a plate of little dumplings into the boiling pot. "Sit down and take a break. I saved a bowl of your favorite vegetable dumplings." I put down my backpack, tidied up the table, and gave it a wipe. Got much left to sell? Then we'll head home, Susan said, placing a steaming bowl in front of me, before getting back to wrapping dumplings under the glow of the stand's light that cast a thin shadow of her silhouette on the ground. The steam from the bowl made my eyes feel a bit misty. Susan smiled at me, her soft gaze hidden behind the steam. Eat up before it gets cold. As I dove my face into the bowl, I scooped up a dumpling with my spoon and put it in my mouth. The warmth, mixed with the fresh taste of vegetables and a hint of white pepper's mild sting, spread from my belly to my heart. I took another, savoring this flavor of being treasured. I finished it all right down to the soup. Susan smiled, cleared my bowl, and said, Your appetite picking up is a good sign for recovery. Once home, Grandma was already asleep. I went to my room to get started on practice problems. Even though I'm repeating senior year, I can't get complacent if I want to score high in the end. Not long after, there was a knock at the door, and Susan came in with a basin of water, floating a few leaves of herbs on the surface. Her face carried a hint of worry. Grandma said you had another nightmare last night. It's been days of poor sleep. That's no good. As she spoke, she scattered herb water around my bed and then touched my forehead with her damp fingers. Maybe you got spooked that day you fell into the water. We'll go to the temple this weekend. I nodded obediently. Okay. On Saturday, Susan woke up early and we took a bus to the base of the mountain. The temple's halfway up the hill with no roads or easy paths leading up, only by stairs. Even so, there was a steady stream of pilgrims because the temple's known for being quite miraculous. Susan struggled with her legs, taking slow steps. She held my hand, sweat beading on her forehead, but her expression was light and easy. The deities here are particularly divine. Make sure to pray sincerely later. It'll help with your nightmares and your upcoming college entrance exams. I murmured agreement, carefully supporting her as we made our way up. Before reaching the temple, we could already hear chants echoing. Near the temple entrance, a young monk waited. He explained that there was a ritual in the main hall and led us to the side chapel instead. After praying and offering some incense money, just as we were about to leave, the abbot called Susan over, saying today was auspicious and offered her a divination stick. I waited outside. There was a large sycamore tree in the courtyard, full of leaves and sturdy limbs, clearly quite old. Some branches had red strings tied to them. I moved in for a closer look. A breeze swept by, rustling the leaves. Amongst the chanting, I thought I heard the jingle of wind chimes. I leaned closer to listen, only to be suddenly pulled back. I met the familiar face in front of me, aged far beyond our last encounter 5 years ago. The poise was gone, replaced by weariness and unkempt hair. She grasped my arm, slightly unfocused but earnest. Have you seen my daughter? Memories from 19 years flashed like fleeting clouds. I looked at her, and the soft sound of wind chimes seemed to wash over my thoughts again. Sycamore leaves gently fell, clarity returning to my world. I shook off her hand, answering calmly, No, I haven't. With that, she crumbled to the ground as if all strength left her, wailing, hiding her face in her hands. I stood in place, quietly watching the red strings dance among the golden sycamore leaves. Inside, I felt calm and untroubled. Her daughter isn't here. Her daughter died 5 years ago at the hands of kidnappers. That was her choice. The chanting continues. Standing under the tree, it suddenly hits me. Today's ceremony is for me. Is it to help me let go of resentment or to wish me a better next life? Can human souls really be transcended? I have no clue. All I know is when people die, it's like a light going out. All the causes and effects of life vanish with death, just as that thin bond of blood dissipated with Sarah's life. No more love or hate, no ties. I look away, turn, and leave the courtyard. Susan finds me as I'm squatting by the temple gate, practicing vocabulary. Her eyes are bright, holding a yellow triangular pouch with red thread stitching. The abbot said wearing this charm will bring good fortune. Susan carefully places the pouch into my pocket, like she's accomplished a big task, looking relieved. Let's go home. No need to work today. Let's observe a fast. As we head down the mountain, I glance towards the main hall. 2 people stand at the entrance, one in monk's robes, the other a tall young man in a sleek black suit with a string of prayer beads on his left wrist. From where I stand, I can only see his profile. He's listening to the abbot speak. I've never seen him before, yet he felt oddly familiar. I wanted another look, but he quickly walked back inside. Maybe the temple really is spiritual, or maybe the charm from Susan truly brought peace, or perhaps that ceremony worked. After that day, no more nightmares. The scene from that day, when the ransom failed, feels distant and unreal, like a dream. And I have finally become Ashley. Every day, waking up on time, making breakfast for Grandma as Susan buys groceries, tackling problem sets like any other senior, picking up Susan after evening classes, and studying some more. On those deep study nights, Susan always brings me hot milk and fills 2 hot water bottles, one for my feet, one for my hands. Though Susan doesn't understand the equations I write, she still sits by my bed sometimes, watching me work. Is senior year tough? She asks. I hold the pen in one hand and a warm bottle in another. A little, but I'll keep going. Mom, I'll get into a good college. I'll make sure you and Grandma have a great life. Susan's eyes soften. Drink your milk while it's warm, she says with a reassuring smile. As long as we're together and safe, every day is a good day. Don't stress too much, just do your best. And as long as your conscience is clear, it's enough. Listening to Susan's gentle words then, I felt calm and secure. Later, in tough times, I'd remember her expression and tone, realizing that everyone faces seemingly unsolvable problems in life. Family understanding and support, as it turns out, can really give you courage, letting you face the road ahead calmly. Life went on, day after ordinary day. A week later, while organizing notes, the homeroom teacher brought someone in. Pause for a moment, everyone. Let's welcome our new classmate, Emily. My pen stopped abruptly, leaving a small ink stain, and I looked up to the platform. Meeting them again was always unexpected. I never thought I'd see my sister like this. She's grown taller. The once innocent face is now refined, with eyes that seemed more indifferent than timid. In that instant, 5 years materialized before me. I suddenly realized that everyone else had moved forward 5 years except for me. Being the class representative, the teacher seated Emily next to me, reminding me to take care of the new student. Emily sat beside me, creating a small breeze. I caught a whiff of jasmine, the scent of the body wash I once loved, which Emily never did. 5 years, just enough for someone's tastes and temperament to change. We're no longer who we were. As a transfer student, Emily didn't have her books yet. I shifted mine to the middle. We can share. Emily glanced my way, her face cold and distant, before pushing the book back to me, then laid down to sleep. Watching her back, I said nothing and returned to my lessons. During a restroom break, I overheard others talking about Emily and her dramatic school transfer. Stay away from Emily, one said. She's crazy. My cousin used to go to her school, said she got into fights and cracked someone's head open, another added. Her family paid it off, so now she's here. Can't be, she looks so fragile. I noticed she even has hearing aids. I felt sorry for her. Who knows, rich folks and their drama, kidnapping and all. Didn't she witness her sister getting killed by kidnappers? Maybe she's not right in the head. I deliberately pushed the stall door open hard, silencing the voices briefly. Whoa, didn't know someone was there. Let's go, find another spot. After everyone left, the place was quiet again. I moved to the sink, looking into the mirror, seeing Ashley's bright face reflected, eyes clear without a trace of Sarah. Back in the classroom, Emily was awake, staring out the window. All day long, she sat like that. After evening class ended and everyone left, she still lingered there. I finished my last problem, packed up, and couldn't help but ask, "You're not going home?" I didn't want to meddle with her business, so I grabbed my backpack and left. The school was quiet. Moonlight shone through the trees, casting a bright glow, and I always knew that the kidnapping was an accident. I didn't hold any grudge against Emily. In fact, seeing her now, all grown up, made me happy. So many things must have happened in the past 5 years. She's changed a lot, but I wasn't interested in finding out. I had no intention of prying into her past, nor did I want to be part of her future. Sarah's story has turned a page. I cherish this chance to start over, and all I want from now on is to just be Ashley. Since Emily transferred here for the first 3 days, she arrived at her seat early, but didn't pay attention in class or speak. I thought we'd stay silent forever, but then she was the first to talk to me. That day, the physics teacher put a problem on the board. I was the only one who got it right. The teacher called me up to explain it. When I got back to my seat, I found Emily had taken my exercise book. I had a habit of marking certain symbols next to similar problem types and knowledge points. It saved time reviewing later. Old habits die hard, so Ashley kept them too. Emily stared at my exercise book and quietly asked, "What do these symbols mean?" Speaking naturally. "Learned this method for organizing problems online. Want me to send you the link?" Emily shook her head. "Your handwriting is a lot like my sister's. It's really nice." My hand paused mid-writing, feigning surprise. "You have a sister?" Emily's voice was as gentle as the wind. "Not anymore." There was a breeze outside, softly wafting jasmine fragrance into the classroom. I turned to look at her, wanting to say something more, but Emily just took off her left hearing aid, lay her head on the desk, turning her back to me, silent, rejecting any conversation. 5 years on, Emily seemed a lot more gloomy. I sighed inwardly and turned my eyes away. A girl named Lisa, sitting in front of me, sneakily handed me a note. "Don't talk to her. She's tough to deal with." So I wrote 2 question marks on the paper. Lisa turned around, winking and motioning to stay quiet, then started scribbling again. The kidnapping case that shocked the nation 5 years ago, her sister was the one killed. Ever since, whenever someone mentions her sister, she loses it. "Keep your mouth shut." Her handwriting was messy, but I could still make out what she wrote. I looked at Emily again, then put the note away and continued listening to the lesson. When I went to the cafeteria for lunch, Lisa pulled me to a corner. She looked around, her eyes filled with gossip. "Are you sure you don't know Emily?" I searched through Ashley's memories, confirming there really was no connection between Ashley and Emily. "Am I supposed to?" Lisa rolled her eyes dramatically. "You really dive into your books, huh? You don't even know about such a huge thing?" "What huge thing?" 5 years ago, the Miller family's daughters were kidnapped. The younger one was saved, but the older one was killed by the kidnappers. That was Emily's sister. They said the older sister was really good, top of her class, super smart. "I've heard about that case," I said, remembering now. 5 years ago, it was all over the news. Everyone knew. The older sister's name was Sarah Miller, and she was only 15. I heard she even saved a kid from the kidnappers before she died. Lisa sighed. She was so brave. It's such a shame. The mention of Sarah Miller made my heart skip a bit, but I quickly calmed down. After all, Sarah was already dead. Then why is Emily so... I hesitated, not wanting to use a bad word. So hard to get along with? Lisa made a face. "I heard she got pretty messed up after the kidnapping. She changed schools a lot, and she's always fighting and causing trouble. Her family had to pay off a lot of people to keep her out of jail. So she's basically a problem child?" I summarized. Lisa nodded vigorously. "Exactly. That's why I told you to stay away from her. She's trouble." I didn't say anything else, just focused on my food. But I couldn't help thinking about Emily. 5 years ago, she was just a little girl, clinging to me in the back of that truck. Now she was this sullen, rebellious teenager. What had she gone through? After lunch, I went back to the classroom to find Emily still there, head down on her desk, seemingly asleep. Her left hearing aid was still off. I hesitated for a moment, then gently tapped her shoulder. "Emily, it's time for class." She didn't move. I tapped her again, a bit harder this time. "Emily?" Suddenly she jerked up, her eyes red-rimmed and filled with a mixture of confusion and anger. "What do you want?" she snapped. I was taken aback. "Class is about to start," I said quietly. She glared at me for a moment, then grabbed her bag and stormed out of the classroom. I watched her go, feeling a strange mix of sadness and pity. I couldn't explain it. It was like a part of me, the part that was Sarah, still felt a connection to this girl, even though she was a stranger now. The rest of the day passed without incident. Emily didn't come back to class. I went home, helped Susan at the dumpling stand, and did my homework. The next day, Emily was back in class, but she avoided me completely. She didn't even look at me, let alone speak. It was like I didn't exist. This went on for a week. We were desk mates, but we were like strangers living in different worlds. Then, one afternoon, everything changed. I was walking home from school, lost in thought about a particularly difficult calculus problem, when I heard shouting up ahead. I looked up and saw a group of teenagers surrounding someone. I recognized Emily's distinctive messy hair. She was being pushed and shoved by the group, her face pale but defiant. So, you're the famous Emily Miller, huh? One of the boys sneered. The one whose sister died to save her? Emily's eyes flashed with anger. Shut up! What? Don't you like talking about your sister? Another boy taunted. I heard she was a real goody two-shoes. Bet she wouldn't have lasted a day in our world. Emily lunged at the boy, but he easily pushed her back. She stumbled and fell to the ground. Something inside me snapped. I couldn't stand there and watch this. I ran forward, pushing my way through the crowd. Leave her alone, I shouted. The teenagers turned to look at me, surprised. Who are you? The first boy asked, raising an eyebrow. I'm her classmate, I said, my voice trembling but firm. And you need to back off. Oh, look, the little hero, he mocked. What are you going to do, call the cops? I stood my ground even though my heart was pounding. Just leave her alone, I repeated. The boy laughed, but then something shifted in his eyes. He looked at Emily, then back at me. Fine, he said. We're done here anyway. He and his friends swaggered off, leaving Emily sitting on the ground, her head in her hands. I knelt down beside her. Are you okay? She didn't answer. I gently touched her arm. Emily? She flinched away from my touch. Don't, she whispered, her voice choked with tears. Just don't. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to help her, but she was pushing me away. I just wanted to make sure you were okay, I said softly. She finally looked up at me, her eyes filled with pain. Why did you do that? She asked. Why did you interfere? I couldn't just stand there and watch them bully you, I said. But why? She insisted. We're not friends. You don't even know me. I know you're Emily, I said, and I know what it's like to be alone. She stared at me for a long moment, then looked away. Just go, she mumbled. Leave me alone. I hesitated, but then I stood up. Okay, I said, but if you need anything, I'm here. I walked away feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. I had helped her, but I had also made her even more distant. As I walked, I thought about Sarah, about her bravery and her sacrifice. And I realized that, in a way, I was still protecting her, even now, by protecting Emily. The next day at school, Emily was different. She still didn't talk to me, but she didn't avoid me either. She sat at her desk, listening to the teacher, taking notes. It was like a wall had come down, just a little. During lunch break, I saw her sitting alone at a table in the cafeteria. I hesitated, then walked over to her. Can I sit here? I asked. She looked up at me, surprised. Then she shrugged. Suit yourself. I sat down across from her. We ate in silence for a few minutes. Then Emily spoke, her voice low. Thank you, she said, for yesterday. I smiled. You're welcome. I don't know why I get so angry, she said, her voice trembling. It's just when people talk about my sister. I understand, I said. It's okay to be angry. No, it's not, she said. It's not okay. I shouldn't be like this. You've been through a lot, I said gently. It's okay to feel however you feel. She looked at me, her eyes searching. You really think so? I do, I said, and I think your sister would want you to be happy. Emily's eyes filled with tears again, but this time, she didn't push me away. She just nodded, and then she started to cry. I reached across the table and took her hand. She didn't pull away. We sat there like that for a long time, two strangers connected by a shared past, a shared loss, and a tentative, fragile hope for the future. From that day on, Emily and I slowly started to become friends. It wasn't easy. She still had her moods, her moments of anger and withdrawal, but she also started to open up, to share little pieces of herself. She told me about her nightmares, about the guilt she felt for surviving, about the pressure she felt from her parents to be perfect, to be like Sarah. They don't see me, she said one day, her voice filled with bitterness. They only see her. They want me to be her, but I can't. I'm not Sarah. You don't have to be Sarah, I said. You're Emily, and that's enough. She looked at me, surprised. You really mean that? I do, I said. You're strong, Emily. You're a survivor, and you're your own person. She smiled, a small, hesitant smile, but it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her. As we got closer, I also started to share things about myself, about Ashley's life, about her family, about her dreams. I want to be a doctor, I told her one day. Ashley always wanted to help people. You'll be a good doctor, Emily said. You're kind. And you? I asked. What do you want to be? She shrugged. I don't know, she said. I haven't thought about it much. You have time, I said. You can be anything you want. She looked at me, a flicker of hope in her eyes. Maybe, she said. Our friendship wasn't always smooth. There were times when Emily would shut down, refusing to talk to anyone. There were times when I would get frustrated with her negativity, with her self-destructive tendencies. But we always found our way back to each other. We had a bond, a connection that went beyond words, beyond understanding. It was a connection forged in loss, in grief, but also in resilience, in hope. One day, Emily came to school with a new haircut. Her long, messy hair was gone, replaced by a short, stylish bob. What do you think? She asked, a hint of nervousness in her voice. It looks great, I said. It really suits you. She smiled, a genuine, bright smile this time. Thanks, she said. I wanted a change. It was more than just a haircut. It was a symbol, a sign that she was starting to move on, to embrace her own identity, to become Emily, not just Sarah's sister. As the college entrance exams approached, we both studied hard. We pushed each other, encouraged each other, helped each other through the tough times. On the day of the exams, we stood outside the testing center, both nervous but also excited. We can do this, I said, giving Emily a reassuring hug. Yeah, she said, a newfound confidence in her voice. We can. We went our separate ways to our assigned testing rooms, but I knew somehow that we would both be okay. After the exams, we waited anxiously for the results. When they finally came, we were both overjoyed. I had scored high enough to get into my dream medical school. And Emily, to everyone's surprise, had done exceptionally well, far better than anyone expected. She had chosen to study art, something she had always been passionate about but had never dared to pursue. I'm going to be an artist, she said, her eyes shining with excitement. I'm going to create things, beautiful things. I hugged her tight. I knew you could do it, I said. That summer, before we both left for college, Emily and I went back to the temple, the one with the old sycamore tree. We stood in the courtyard watching the red strings dance in the breeze. Do you think she's here? Emily asked, her voice soft. I don't know, I said, but I like to think she's at peace. Emily nodded. Me too, she said. We stood there in silence for a long time, just listening to the rustling leaves and the distant chanting. Then Emily turned to me. Thank you, she said, for everything. You don't have to thank me, I said. Yes, I do, she said. You helped me find myself again. You helped me become Emily. I smiled. And you helped me become Ashley, I said. We hugged each other, a long, heartfelt hug. Then we walked out of the temple, hand in hand, ready to face the future, whatever it may hold. We were two different people with two different lives, but we were connected by a shared past, a shared loss, and a shared friendship that would last a lifetime. As we walked, I thought about Sarah, about her bravery, her kindness, her sacrifice. And I realized that, in a way, she was still with us, living on in our memories, in our hearts, and in the lives we were now living, lives that were, in part, a tribute to her. We had both found our way, found our peace, and found our future. And that, I knew, was all that Sarah would have ever wanted.